Welcome back to A Celtic State of Mind. I'm Paul John Dykes, and this afternoon I'm joined by none other than Lawrence Connolly. Lawrence, we have loads to discuss. There has been something of a meltdown online. You might have noticed it because Celtic lost the game. That doesn't happen too often, and it certainly doesn't happen in the Cup. First competition, be that league or cup competition, that Brendan Rodgers has lost as manager of Celtic. And it's as though we're throwing out the baby with the bathwater, Lawrence. There's a lot being said. What's your view on this? Is there a bit of overreaction, or is there a lot in some of the points being made?
I think there's definitely a bit of overreaction, but it doesn't mean there's not something in the points. Bad day at the office for us. Not helped by the officials. I think the tackle on Taylor or the assault, whatever you want to call it, it's a red card. The goal doesn't happen. It's debatable whether the goal's onside or not, and you've got a Stonewall penalty that would have potentially taken the tie to extra time. So, yeah, there's a few things in there, but we need to get signings in. We know that. Yeah. Mm-hmm. We've got a few in, but it was areas that we weren't really struggling in. I think everyone had said, well, possibly both fullback situations they want in. The injury news isn't good now. Looks like Rocky's injured.
So. Yes, it does. And the thing is, Lawrence, right? And Jungle Lion comes in. And by the way, Jungle Lion, I hope you're enjoying your break, your vacation, your holiday in Spain. You're still tuning in. And I'm just trying to picture the scene, Jungle Lion. Maybe you want to share that on your Twitter page, if you can still call it Twitter. Watching Acsom over in Spain, show us it. Are you at a bar? Are you at a poolside? Are you chilling on the balcony or the veranda? Let us know. But here is a point you're making. When does this become a panic crisis? Well, we're not quite at the broken crest stage yet, Lawrence. But as you said, there is a defensive injury crisis. And I want to talk about that because it leaves us with the big question as to who plays centre-half alongside Lagerbielke. Obviously, he would be an automatic choice at this moment in time, having only been in the building for less than a week. You and I had a wee chat before we came on as well about emergency signings. We've seen a few of them in the past where you're bringing in a player because of an injury crisis. Are we going to actually be reduced to that? 1 minute, we're talking about having a first and a second team that we could line up and beat anybody in Scotland. That was the chat last season, Lawrence. It doesn't seem to be the chat now. So let's have a wee look at what has changed since Brendan Rodgers came in. And I think that a lot of this is probably unexpected for us. So first and foremost, something that's been made, the changes have been made by Brendan Rodgers. Other changes have been foisted upon him. And obviously we're talking Jota, who was one of our most creative players last season. Lawrence, he's gone, and he's not been replaced, right? So that's the first point of discussion I want to talk about, because Jota is, of course, in the news. You played homage to Jota last season by appearing on A Celtic State of Mind with the double denim. We are missing his creativity. I suggested coming into the new season that it was time for Abada to step up. And from the pre-season, Lawrence, I thought he had. So how disappointing is it when you watch a performance like that against Kilmarnock and Abada doesn't step up? That's the type of game where you want your creative players to do something, to win the game, to turn it around, shows a wee bit of magic. Didn't really happen for Abada, did it?
No, I think Kilmarnock played against us really well. It didn't happen for Abada. I suppose the Jota replacements were brought in are in at the lower end of the market. They're all potential, aren't they? I think we're rumoured to be cash rich. I think everybody was expecting us to maybe bring someone in at some quality and at a better level. And I think that's what was missing. Kyogo wasn't getting much change. Where was your backup striker? He's out injured. What changes can we make? Yang looked okay when he came on, but yeah, for Jota, 25 million. We've not spent it. How much have we spent to replace him? There's Tilo, there's Yang. We've not invested a lot of the money, have we? And he was a special player for us. He was the player that could break down defences. Mm-hmm. We don't seem to have anyone first team ready to do that for us. Or certainly we didn't have the weekend.
No, we didn't. And by the way, I take on board everything that's been said in relation to matters that weren't really like self-sabotaging insofar as Brendan Rodgers has mentioned the state of the pitch. And it is a state. The state is the word. And by the way, we do have, zooming in all the way from Japan, our very good friend, Mr. Liam Carrigan. There you go. Liam, are you wearing what looks like a PSV Eindhoven jersey there, my friend?
Well, I was told it would be childish, pathetic, and somewhat narrow-minded of me to do so, but yeah,
So you dived straight in. It says I'm all about that. Brilliant. I've no idea why you'd be wearing that. I do remember going to the Netherlands to play in one of the football tournaments that you used to play in when you were an underage boys club footballer. And it was my mission to go and get a PSV Eindhoven top. And I think the reason behind it was the original Ronaldo played for them, didn't he? And it was Bobby Robson that signed them. And he was an amazing talent. And yes, I managed to get it. And it's one of the originals, Liam, one of the Adidas originals with a big white square panel on the back. Who knows where it is? I think my brothers maybe still got it. But yes, PSV. Aye, we're all supporting PSV today. We're talking about Jota, Liam. And what led us to that was, a lack of creativity in the final third against Kilmarnock is one of the reasons. Another reason we're talking about it is because it's one of these issues that Brendan Rodgers has had to deal with. It's a change that he's had to deal with. It's been, forced upon him. He didn't make the change. And I don't think we've adapted so far. We've certainly not replaced him. But my suggestion was that Abada was going to be that replacement. And to a point, I think he's done pretty well, but he was poor. So how much are we missing Jota? And what do you make of the Jota situation over in Saudi as well?
Well, first of all, apologies for the fan in the background. The reason I was a bit late joining you is because my headset had decided to, do a Todd Cantwell on me. But anyway, the Jota situation's a strange one in terms of how it's all going down with the Saudi club. But as it stands right now, he's no longer a Celtic player. It's really not any of our business. We got 25 million for him, and it's up to us to invest that in a replacement, which thus far we haven't. I think Yang's got the potential to be that replacement in due course, but as Sunday showed, we can't really afford to give a player 2 to 3 months to bed in. We've got Champions League games next month. We've got our biggest rivals for the championship in a couple of weeks, and we need to get our act together now. And at the moment, we do not have a ready-made replacement for Jota.
No, you're talking about the situation he finds himself in. I think that it's connected to quite a lot of what's been happening, right? I'm going to bring this point up first. We came into the pre-season and we had a discussion going into it because Ange dropped a bit of a bomb in one of his pressers where he said that he expected to lose 1 or 2 and he's not talking, these guys that are bloating the squad, not contributing to the squad. The way he was talking was 1 or 2 of the first team players. He expected us to lose them. He's gone before they have, but that's another matter. And we didn't expect to lose Jota. We certainly didn't expect the influx of cash. And I know that we talk about 25 million. I also know that that's not how much Celtic got because of all the other add-ons, etc., that Benfica had on the deal. But it was a huge cash influx that we didn't expect. But what happens, and I think it was yourself that made the point, is if someone goes for a huge amount of money, then the marketing and the bargaining power of that club changes when they're trying to sign players then on in over the next few weeks. So I think we're in a situation, and I think that situation is that we're going to be doing some late business. And it's quite uncomfortable, Lawrence, because we got used to doing the business early. And I think that's why people are getting a wee bit concerned.
Yeah, definitely. We were praising the relationship that Nicholson and Ange had. Get the signings in early, get them bedded in. We've broken up a really successful centre-half partnership. One's now out injured. Goodness knows how long for. And we've sold Starfelt. The 2 centre-halves looked okay. They're young, they're not as experienced, are they? We'll let a Swedish centre-half go to 28. A lot of experience in the game. Have we replaced that experience in the team? I don't think so. Now it looks like Rocky's out injured. So for me, I'd be looking at the free transfer market in centre-halves. There's a few kicking about that bring some quality and experience to us. We do have a bit of injury crisis in centre defence.
Would that would that appease the current feeling amongst the Celtic fan base in relation to, for example, Celtic follower comes in, afternoon all, Lowell needs to get his finger out, and I'm thinking you're referring to the Mark Lowell, who has been praised. He's been praised highly by Ange and by Brendan Rodgers, and fast before this window closes. Once again, we've regressed from a position of strength. I'm asking the question, though, Liam, and I'm going to throw this one to you. How much of that is due to, and it's a strange one, it's quite contrarian, we get all that money from the Jota deal, but then clubs are going to really be playing a hard line with us when it comes to negotiating a deal for players. So whereby, as Lawrence quite rightly says, we've kind of been shopping in the kind of lower end of the market at the moment. We may well have had our eye or even had discussions with more expensive, more quality players. But the team that obviously has the registration of that player could be playing hardball because they know we've got this pile of cash in the bank. How big is it an issue? Because, as I say, we were getting used to doing the business early. Are we looking for maybe a bottleneck situation where we've got 2 or 3 deals to go through and it doesn't happen till the last day or two?
I mean, the problem we've got as well is that we're in that sort of a mid-range where we're not quite financially big enough to seriously compete at Champions League level, but we've already got a squad that will win the league. I'm quite sure of that. You know, if we stopped signing players now, I think we would still win the league because we're in a state of flux, but our nearest rivals are worse on current form. But I'm going to refer back to something that Martin O'Neill said when he came to Celtic back in 2001. He said Rangers are the benchmark, as they were then. They're not anymore. They're not. And we need to ditch that mindset in terms of when it comes to signing players. We need to sign players that we think are going to do some damage in Europe, not just players that we think are going to be good enough to beat Rangers 4 times a season or whatever they're calling themselves this year. That's the sort of paradigm shift that we need. But I think recent transfer activity shows that the board are stalling a wee bit in that regard. And like you say, the financial situation of other clubs knowing we've got a few quid doesn't help that. But I fully expect we're going to see a few signings in the next week or two because, frankly, we have to. After what happened at the weekend, we have to.
We do. And what happened at the weekend in terms of the performance was one thing. And then as Celtic fans, talking about every single day on here, you're then looking and listening to every single word and every nuance that comes out of Brendan Rodgers' mouth and Callum McGregor's press conferences and all that kind of stuff. You're starting to wonder how deep this issue, and as Jungle Lion said earlier, when do you call it a crisis? We're not quite there yet. But there are definitely issues, and a big part of that is in the transition. Before we move away from the Jota information and all that, I was looking at some of the quotes that were coming out of Saudi, and they're talking about an internal crisis dominated by tension. You think the boy's been there for 2 months, they want shot of him on loan. And I'm not going to really talk about the possibility of him coming back to Celtic on loan, because I think that the Saudi club will look to move elsewhere. Apparently there's Serie A interest in him as well. They'll be looking maybe at a situation where they can get him out on a loan with a view to selling him to that club, and obviously we're not going to be shelling that kind of money out. So I don't think it's going to be entertained by Celtic or by his new club. However, is this a reminder, Lawrence, of the perils of always just chasing the dollar? Because let me just ask you the question. Did Jota go there for anything other than money? Did he go for individual ambition or to use it as a platform to enhance his profile, brand, career? Or did he go for money?
I think he's waiting for money. But listen, players are always going to leave us. We know in a certain club. Our issue is the level or the speed and the level that we replace them at. Jota's been out a wee while now. We've not brought anyone in that I've seen that's anywhere near him that's first team ready to do the job that he was doing. So what we're saying, it might be young. I agree with Liam, he's looked decent. What we're going to do, wait 8 months until he's up to speed, approaching the Jota levels. Where's your season going at that stage? we have money to spend. You know, there's players out there that we could get. It just seems that we need to take a leap and maybe get some more quality in. You know, that's what Brendan was saying after the game. He needs some quality in, whether that comes from free transfer market or spending a bit of the money we have in the bank. I think we need to bite the bullet and get it done.
The point on the free transfer, Lawrence, you've mentioned that a couple of times. Where would we find the quality though? Because is that short-termism? Are we looking at a market that, you know, we're actually tearing up the kind of strategy at that stage, looking at that type of market? It's not a market we normally shop in.
Well, look at Toure when he first came in, the Rodgers first time round about. Cracking 1 year defender for us. You know, he brought on the rest of the defence. So we could be looking at somebody like Phil Jones or Jerome Boateng, bring them in. We've got a bit of centre-half crisis going on just now. We've got young centre-halves that need developed. No, it could be a short-term answer, but I think it's quite a defensive crisis just now, what we're facing.
Well, let's have a look at that. But before I do that, I'm going to ask you, Liam, we've spoken loads about players going to Saudi for the dough. Is this a cautionary tale in Jota's case? Don't always chase the money. It could really disrupt your career.
I can say from first-hand experience, yeah, it is. On a much, much lower scale financially. As an English teacher and an English editor, which is kind of my two main jobs, you know, the two main markets where I could go right now and probably double or even treble my salary would be the Middle East, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, places like that, or Hong Kong, where I used to work. And in Hong Kong, 10 years ago, I was making probably about 60% more per month than I do now. But I saw the way the wind was blowing with Hong Kong and I got out of there about 8 or 9 years ago. And, you know, now we're at a stage where I could be arrested over there just for having this conversation. So, you know, I think that Saudi players, to a lesser degree, it may be less likely to happen because there's more exposure. But the main reason why I would never go and work in any of these countries is because the rule of law there does not work the same way it does in countries where we have established international norms. You know, it's all very well a football team or an English school ever advertising a salary that's astronomical. But you get there and a month later they say, right, beat it, we don't want you anymore. So what are you going to do? You know, and that's the situation Jota's in now. That is a situation I've seen other English teachers in places like China end up in before. And it's the same problem. It's like you're dealing with people who don't play by the same rules you do. So that's the risk you take. And I hope Jota gets a move to another club, but he's probably going to have to take a significant pay cut wherever he goes.
Grass isn't always greener. Green Lichty, let's bring you in. You are commenting on the YouTube channel. If you want to get involved in a live discussion, all you need to do is subscribe. It's free of charge. Rumour has it that John Kennedy is the only fit defender at the moment. Right, let's have a look at defensive crisis. And I think it definitely is an individual defensive injury crisis. Right, so out, correct me if I'm wrong, Cameron Carter-Vickers is out. We've also got Stephen Welsh walking about in a moon boot. He's out. Nawrocki is out. There's a bit of debate about when he's going to be back. Kobayashi is out. I asked that question this morning because he has gone off the radar since being injured in the game in Japan. And obviously the big departure has been Carl Starfelt. But in terms of backup, by the way, and I'm not talking about, we shouldn't have let them go because it was the right thing to do. We no longer have guys like Boston Lowell, who has joined Scott Browndon at Fleetwood. Osaze Urigide was shipped out on a permanent, which I totally agreed with. And who do we have fit is the next question. And how do you build your defence around it? So we've got Lager Bielk just in. He's played one game and he is going to be your first pick as a centre-half at the moment. But who lines up alongside him is the question. And at the moment, again, as I say, if I've forgotten anybody, give me a shout. But I think we have Liam Scales in the building. And of course, Tomoki Iwata, who was reverted to a centre-half last season for the last few games. Lawrence, how do you line up for this Saturday's game and with a view to the Rangers game coming up?
I think you have to put in Scales alongside him. Either that or buy somebody. buy another centre half or sign another centre half. But out of Watt and Scales at centre half, I would play Scales just now.
Right. Well, listen, what Lawrence is suggesting, and I totally get it, is we're in a situation, Liam, where you might go into these games and you're not confident with the A and other players. So Lagerbielke's in. Is it Scales? Is it Iwata? And what Lawrence is saying is, you know what, just under circumstances, let's do something a wee bit more short term. Let's bring someone in on a free or on a loan. We've seen that happening in the past. I can think of a few examples of it working, not working. How do you play this? Because I think if you do it, what you're saying to the other guys is, I've got no confidence in you. I would rather bring in somebody temporarily than play you. And what you've got with that other one is, this injury crisis within a few weeks can clear up pretty quickly. And then you've got an overloaded central defenders. So how would you play it?
If we went down the route that Lawrence is suggesting, a short-term signing, it would need to be somebody who is at the end of their career and wouldn't mind being a squad player and could perhaps step up to a coaching role in due course. Now, I'm just throwing this out as an example. Don't savage me in the comments, okay?
Right, you're going to be savaged after you've said that. You're going to be savaged, right? Right.
Sergio Ramos, 37 years old, currently available on a free, would fit the profile perfectly. Would come in and would absolutely smash Rangers to pieces. Now, don't make any mistake about that. But he's also going to be a magnificent presence to have around the stadium if we got him even on a 1-year deal. And people talk about marquee signings. I don't think you get a much bigger marquee than that. So even at 37, I don't know.
No,
I'm just throwing it out there.
You're throwing it out there.
Going on what we have, I'm going to say that Scales would be the option I would go with as well, because I like Iwata. I think he's a great player. I don't think he's a central defender. And I think we've already seen that once against that mob, and I don't want to see it again.
I agree about Iwata. I think a lot of people are judging him, Liam, on the performances as a centre-half and as a right-back during the pre-season. And I prefer to think about his performances as a central midfielder, where I was impressed with him. And I'm going to come back to that because I think that's also an area that we need to discuss in the midfield. So in terms of Jota being gone, I think we're of the view that he's certainly not been replaced sufficiently. But what I was talking to Lawrence about before he came in, Liam, is whether you think Abada stepped up to the plate the way that maybe I certainly had suggested and others might have thought he would. Because it's time for Abada to do that, isn't it?
Yeah, thus far he hasn't. But I don't know how much of that is down to him and how much of it is down to the change in tactics and the change in tempo, which seems to have thrown the whole team out of sync at the moment. Abada did not have a good game on Sunday, but about 8 or 9 of our players didn't have a good game on Sunday. So you can't really judge him alone in a game where most of the team didn't turn up.
No.
So, no, at the moment he's not doing it, but in the fullness of time he could. The problem we have is that both Maeda and Abada, despite playing on opposite flanks, they're both players who are their emphasis on speed. And we don't have the trickery that Jota used to give us. We need someone who can employ that bit of trickery. I think Yang could be the one that does that in the fullness of time, but he needs time to bed in. James Forrest can give us that sporadically, even still. But Abada, he needs to kind of refine his game if he's going to fit into this new system, or the manager needs to let go of his ego and go back to playing the way we played last season. So we'll have to wait and see.
That is a point of discussion, right? Because we're entering a situation where there were many changes already, but we're talking about the ones that were kind of forced upon Brendan, such as players leaving unexpectedly, an injury crisis that you could never have guessed. And then you look at that and say, how can I solidify this team, Lawrence, right? Because we'll also come back to the fact that the midfield's been bypassed at the moment. With Ibrox, just around the corner, do you start looking at the situation and say, well, we cannot lose that midfield battle, which we are doing currently. Do we revert back to inverted fullbacks? Do we go back to the wingers playing a slightly different role in the team, whereby I think I've already mentioned that there's less of an onus, I would suggest. I'd like to see the stats on this one. There seems to be less of an onus for the likes of Maeda to backtrack and cover for Taylor, which I think is one of the reasons Taylor is under the cosh so much in these games, and it's been really noticeable. So the wingers' roles changed. Obviously, the fullback roles changed. We're coming up to Ibrox, Lawrence. We're being kind of like hamstrung by the fact that we've got this defensive crisis. Do you revert back to some of the methods that we were deploying so successfully over the last couple of years?
I don't know if we've got the personnel to do it just now. You know, Jota offered us something completely different. Liam's touched on it. The other wingers are a bit pace. Jota offered that trickery. I think you want to protect your centre halves just now. Whatever partnership it's going to be, Slagerbelt and Scales, it's going to be a fairly new partnership. I maybe played 2 sixes, Awatt and McGregor in front of you. You know, it means you don't have to switch back to inverted fullbacks. You've got a bit more men in midfield defensively because they aren't got any protection. And I think Awatt and McGregor would win the midfield battle. And try and hit in the break. That's it. You know, you play your strengths. Abada and Maeda are lightning quick. Kyogo's quick. Sit back, hit them on the break.
Right. If you play with the two, playing defensively, protecting the back central defensive partnership, who at that stage will have played a maximum 1 game together, Lawrence, if it is indeed Lagerbielke and Scales. Who else do you play in the midfield? How do you build that? How do you shape that? Are you still playing with 3 in the middle? You play Matt O'Reilly in front of him?
Yeah, play Matt in front of him.
Right. I mean, these are all the dilemmas that Brendan Rodgers is facing, Liam. And obviously, by the end of this month, we don't know how many more new players are going to be in the building. I'm always loath to throw a player right into a big game like that. I really am. And that's why I am definitely against bringing in somebody that's a short-term sign-in or a loan or a free. I don't want to do that. I think that's panic. I would say that's a bit of a panic buy. To me, it's not part of the strategy. Under the circumstances, I can see why it's been raised and I can see why somebody would consider it. But going into a game like that with regards to the central defensive partnership being a new one, the fullbacks not being on the best of form because the role has changed. The wingers, similarly, not being on the best of form because their role seems to have changed. What do you change? Do you revert back to any of the previous shape or methods that we were utilising so well before, Liam? Or do you think, as Brendan Rodgers, he would see that as a step back, almost as if to say, well, I've got my plan for this team and I'm sticking to it?
When I think back to some of the great victories over the old incarnation of Rangers and the new one as well, one of the key things has always been that we've had, if we've got into a game with injury problems or players underperforming, whatever, the manager pulls a sort of a wild card, a masterstroke. I seem to remember James Forrest coming in and unexpectedly ripping Rangers to bits the first time Rodgers was here. Go back further, Johan Mialbi made his debut at centre-back in the 5-1 game on my birthday of all days. And Lubo Moravcik played up front that game, which was, again, something that nobody, particularly the Rangers defence, were prepared to deal with. I think that's what we need for this Rangers game. We need a wild card. We need something that, just going back to Ange ball isn't going to work because Ange isn't here anymore, right? That's not Brendan Rodgers' style. As much as I wish we could have continued that, we opted for a manager with a different approach. But I think he needs to kind of look at how it's going so far, realise that it's not really working out, and change things up a wee bit. But do something that we're not expecting. Throw in somebody, start a player we're not expecting to start. Start with a formation, play 3 at the back or something. Do something completely unpredictable. That is how we could catch them cold and end up winning and winning well.
Well, a player that's already been mentioned who could well be that player. And as I say, there may well be more players in the building that we're unaware of at the moment, is Yang. And I think that in all the moments that I've seen him coming into the fray, Lawrence, he has impressed. He suffered a wee bit at Kilmarnock by slipping. Jerry Taylor was talking about it yesterday. He seemed to find it difficult on the surface, Yang. But he did try. He tried to be that tricky player. The first, passage of play he was involved in was for me, very impressive. And he does look like the guy that could give you that wee spark, that wee bit of magic dust, Lawrence, that could change things, and an unexpected, unknown quantity to this Rangers side. So with the view that, the wingers aren't firing on all cylinders as we would expect, and the fact that Yang has impressed in all these cameo appearances, is he the man, do you think, that could give us that spark?
Well, he's probably one of the better players against Kelly at the weekend, wasn't he? He's looked decent any time he's come on.
Mm-hmm.
Saying that, Abada seems to like playing against Rangers, doesn't he?
He does.
Big moments for that. I suppose it's what formation Brendan's going to go with, isn't it? If he's going to go, if he starts Yang, then Maeda or Abada come on to replace him partway through the game.
Mm-hmm.
Would Yang get a full 90 minutes? But he's certainly in contention for some minutes on the evidence we've seen so far. I think our main issue is the quality. We sold a £25 million player, and I don't even think we've spent 12 million in that so far this season. And it's telling, the drop off in quality. So hopefully Yang gets up to speed. Hopefully he's good enough. But we've got another game before the Safeco game, so we're a bit worried about that at the moment.
All right. Well, we will talk about the St Johnstone game, obviously, because you would expect that in terms of the shape, Liam, we're going to get an idea of how we're going to approach the game at Ibrox. We will also talk about the decisions. They've been raging on since Sunday. It's something that post-match we did speak about, but I think that at that stage we were so disappointed with our own performance. We didn't labour some of the poor decisions that have been analysed and spoken about and debated ever since. And we're going to be talking about that because I've not heard Liam or Lawrence's views on some of the decisions. Do we have a central defensive crisis? Yes, we do. What do we do about it? Let us know in the comments field. Do you run with Lagerbielke and Scales? Do you revert back to Iwata, who didn't really impress there last season? Do you bring in more quality in relation to the centre halves, or do you go for something more short term? You bring in a free transfer or a loan deal just to get us through this next couple of months until some of the players are back. Let us know in the comments field. But we're going to talk now then. I'll start with yourself, Liam. Decisions on the weekend. You know what? It's one of these things where we talk about the refereeing decisions if we win, lose or draw, Liam. And we say it all the time. It's not sour grapes. When we get beat, you're looking for the reasons. Listen, we've got to take that on the chin. Our performance wasn't good enough. Individual performances were abysmal all over the park. And, Kilmarnock faced us the way we kind of expected them to, and they got the result. However, there were some real issues, some bones of contention about the refereeing decisions that were made. Let's start with Taylor. Now, Taylor's had a hard time of it this season, Liam. He's not really found the form that he had under Ange, and apologies to everybody in the comments that's saying, stop talking about Ange. It's very natural. He was here a few months ago. I'm talking about Taylor and his performances under Brendan and the fact that they've not been up to scratch. And, he's taken out. He's taken out by Armstrong, who's a very influential player for Kilmarnock, who was involved in the goal. Part of the lead up to the goal was in the area of the park that Greg Taylor would have been in. So it does affect things. And, he wasn't sent off. Do you think it was as bad as a sending off, Liam?
I think it should certainly have been looked at. I have seen players get sent off for similar offences. But, the thing is about this, like you say, win, lose or draw, we talk about these decisions. But when we win, people who don't want us to have the conversation say, oh, well, you won, what are you moaning about? And then when we lose, it's like, oh, you're just bitter because you got beat. The underlying current is they just don't want to have the conversation. Mm-hmm. And that is where, their argument falls apart. It's like, well, in what context can we talk about poor refereeing? In what context can we talk about penalties that should have been that were not given? In what context can we talk about goals that were offside? It's look, Celtic could have played for 180 minutes at the weekend and not scored the way they were playing, right?
Yeah.
If we got a penalty, the way things are going, we probably have missed it. But still would have been nice to have a penalty that we should have had. And I think that amidst all of this kind of post-mortem, if you like, I do want to just acknowledge that Kilmarnock played really well. They approached the game with a kind of ferocious, fearless attitude. They get stuck into us the same way they get stuck into Rangers on day one of the season, and it worked for them the same way. I wish that more teams in the league would have that approach of just getting in about it and not being afraid, because more teams would get results against Celtic and Rangers if they showed that approach. And it's not very often you'll hear me compliment Kilmarnock. They are not a team that I have much time for, but credit where it is due. They played us, and they played us well. They knew exactly where and how to hit us.
Yeah, one of the officials was quite happy to have a wee smile and a handshake with McInnes after the game, but that's just normal, obviously. So you reckon penalty, yes, offside, should have been called offside, Taylor should have been looked at least. What about yourself, Lawrence? The three big talking points when it comes to the decisions made, and we've already qualified the fact, listen, we know we weren't good enough, but we're going to talk about these things because it's important to try and get some kind of consistency within these decisions. Was it a penalty? Was their goal offside? And should Armstrong have been more severely penalised for his elbow on Taylor?
Listen, all decisions that should have went to VAR, but it doesn't seem to get any progress with VAR, and they're still not communicating why they're doing things or what's been said. I think in France, they're getting to listen to discussion. This is what we see, but we don't see. And Taylor, again, for me, he sticks his elbows into Taylor's head and draws blood. I think it's deliberate. If it's not sending off, I don't know what is. The penalties, he's went for the ball. He's not got contact with the ball. He's tripped the player. It's just a blatant penalty. The offside, goodness knows why they're drawing the line where they drew it. It's it looks like his shoulder's way past where they're drawing the line. He can score with his shoulder. You need to ask, the guys in the VAR studio why they haven't taken it from his shoulder. It's a close decision. I don't know if it's on or off, to be honest, but I know they've not drawn the line in the right place.
No, that's right.
They can't even draw the line in the right place to make a decision. That line helps them make the decision and would help us kind of look and go, right, there's a line in the right place. But what we've got is guys in the VAR studio that can't draw the line in the right place.
Yeah, you're right. And you were there, Lawrence, when we were talking to Peter Grant about this very issue. Yeah. And you're presented with an image, a still image, and that's the only one you're given. And you've got to look at that. And then you think, well, wouldn't it be great if we could do the angle and bring the angle right round to see, just obviously because that angle might be deceiving. Perhaps his elbow or that area of his body is further back than it looks from that particular angle, that elevated angle. And let's be able to come round and have a look at it that way with all the computer graphics. No, we can't do that because we have got the cheapest version of VAR that you can possibly purchase. So we can't even do it. So that's why the debate rages on. And also with the lines, Lawrence, I agree with that. It just confuses matters entirely. And obviously, Granty was telling us about how a friend of his is one of the guys that does the graphics. So you can change the lines, you can make them thinner or thicker to make sure your toe is beyond it or not, and all this kind of stuff. So I do think the debate is going to rage on because we've got the tin pot version of VAR and we're using it in a tin pot way. And when you've got players like Barry Ferguson coming out saying it was an absolute stonewall penalty, then you think to yourself, yeah, these decisions were poor, very, very poor. But so were Celtic. So there's the view of Lawrence and Liam. What did you reckon of the big decisions that were made at the weekend? I'm going to bring in IH Decorating. I was going to say loyal viewer, a long-standing viewer, a devout viewer, IH Decorating. This season could unravel very quickly. A ton of players who don't fit the manager, powder puff midfield, injuries to key men, and glaring deficiencies all over the squad not addressed. We are saying how Brendan Rodgers will quickly steady the Celtic ship. And I do have confidence that he will, Liam. IH Decorating's pointed out a lot of things that are wrong at the moment. But let's not forget the quality, which is the big word, because it's the one Brendan used himself, of the manager, of the gaffer who will be able to galvanise the side, maximise the performances of some of the players who aren't playing so well. This is temporary, isn't it? It's not something that is going to continue. If it did continue, Brendan would change it. He would either change the shape or would change the player. So I don't think it's a situation that's going to fester under Brendan Rodgers, is it?
Let's just remember, historically, whenever a new manager comes into Celtic, It always takes a few games to get things right.
Yeah.
Wim Jansen lost his first 2 games in charge. Gordon Strachan, first thing he did was get gubbed 5-0 by Artmedia Bratislava. Right? Even Ange lost his first game away to Hearts. Right? We are notoriously slow starters. It's just unfortunate that we lost the one game that actually could, that has effectively cost us a trophy, rather than a league game. But
yeah,
it happens every season. I don't think it's panic stations yet, but like our commenter said there are glaring problems in the squad that need to be addressed. And that's why we've got Brendan Rodgers in the building. That's his job. That's what he's got to do, is sort this mess out and sort it out quickly. Because as we all know, it doesn't matter if you're Brendan Rodgers, Jose Mourinho, whoever. Another 3 or 4 games like Sunday and you'll get the bullet just like any manager would. So that's where being a Celtic manager is not like another job. You can't say, oh, well, we'll get it right next month. No, get it right in the next game or we're in trouble. So I expect a reaction from the manager, but I also expect a reaction from the players going into the St Johnstone game. I think they will hopefully be hurting as much as we are after the weekend, and they'll come out and try and prove a point.
You do hope that, Liam, and I do think when I talk about Brendan Rodgers, Liam, I think back to some of the things he did with players, for example, last time round. Being able to wring out the absolute best and the most out of certain individuals. He's got a style about him in terms of the man management that's already been spoken about by the likes of Matt O'Reilly, where he can really tap into the state of mind of an individual, the mentality of an individual, and make them believe in their own ambitions to get there. The club will benefit. And I do believe that Brendan Rodgers, we've not seen the best of him yet, actually, since he came back. I think he's a better manager than he was first time round. I think his time at Leicester has improved him as a gaffer, and he will be able to tap into the individuals who are already there. We're still going through a real transition in terms of getting rid of a lot of players, Lawrence, as well. I mean, we talk about, bringing in another striker. You and I have had this conversation so many times, Lawrence, and I remember the game against St Johnstone, it was on Boxing Day, where Kyogo was rushed back. He pulls up in the game at McDermott Park, and we've no strikers. We have to bring on Joey Dawson. Remember that? So we had to bring on a player who, 18-year-old he was at the time, who we specifically bought for the B team. He wasn't ready to come in. Like you say, he played all right when he did come in. But we're in a situation now where, because of guys like Ayeti who haven't left the building, we're probably reluctant to buy another striker. But one injury down, and you've got Kyogo, no one else. And by the way, I'm not saying he was the issue at the weekend. I thought Kyogo really worked hard. He tried to create chances. He tried to go deep to try and make something happen. But sometimes in a game, Lawrence, you just want to put on a different option up top. And we've had that in the past. At the moment, we don't have it. We don't have the depth up top. So when it comes down to even the recruitment of players, right now, if we were to go out and buy the striker from Brøndby, for example, I still don't think that Celtic fans would be saying, right, that's what we need to turn this round, because we're still not good enough in terms of the depth at the back. The full backs aren't adapting to the style. The midfield seems to be getting passed by. So I don't think that's a priority, although it is obviously an area that we're looking at.
But listen, we're light up top. Who's injured? As you said, we've got Kyogo. Liam will tell us made as a striker. But if you're bringing in a striker, you want somebody that's challenging Kyogo, not another project player. And age is a huge miss. Tony Ralston's filling in. We're 3 games in. We've not played our first choice defence yet. We've got problems at the back. We know Joe Hart's going to need replaced at some point. And I think midfield we've got loads of options in there. I think most of the problems coming from defence. It's not settled. And we'll do have a solid foundation just now. Coupled by, we sold Starfelt. Love him or loathe him, his results in the park were pretty good for us. Having Carter Vickers didn't lose a league game when they started together. Carter Vickers long term. The 2 young centre halves I've got, they look good. One of them's injured already. Stephen Welsh, who we thought was going to have to move on for the benefit of his career, has a chat with Brendan. Brendan thinks he can develop him. Signs a 4-year deal, gets injured.
I know. He's one of the guys, Lawrence, I was talking about. He's one of the players that you probably, would write off. But Brendan Rodgers might be able to get something out of, and he obviously did have that belief in him, and he signed him up, and it was the timing was absolutely horrendous for the player getting injured when he did. But he's a prime example of a player who other managers, like Ange last season, he played 6 games last season, were thrown by on the scrap heap. Rodgers comes in, sees something in the player and thinks, I can get the best out of you. We're not seeing it because we've been dreadfully unlucky with the injuries, but he is going to do that. And I'm going to bring this up as well because as difficult as it is to keep up with the comments, because there's 1,200 watching the show live right now. And by the end of the 1 hour, we'll probably have about 1,000 comments in there. So apologies that I can't bring everybody up, obviously, but I do try and gauge them. But there's a few arguments raging in there as normal. And Les Paul Styled says, it's embarrassing to see so many comments saying Callum is finished, Celtic are doomed, etc. Madness. Right, I want to talk about Callum McGregor now that you brought it up. And the reasons why he's not hitting the form, and indeed the midfield are kind of struggling. I said earlier, Liam, about overloading the midfield, because that's a battle you've got to win against Rangers, particularly at Ibrox. It is a concern for me at this stage, sitting here, that we might not be able to do it. And one of the biggest concerns really is, or are rather, the performances of Callum McGregor. And I said yesterday, my kind of view on it is there's a couple of things happening in the team that is affecting the midfield. One being Joe Hart's been told, don't play the ball out as much as you did before. So if you're under pressure, clear the ball, clear your lines. And I think the centre-halves have been doing that as well, Liam. And in time, the centre-halves won't just be clearing the ball, they'll be finding the pockets of space behind the full-backs, etc. But that's to solve that problem at the back. And because he's been told to do that, Joe Hart's not been the subject to conversation against Aberdeen or even against Kilmarnock when we've lost the game. So that side of it's working. But it is affecting the amount of ball that Callum McGregor's getting, because generally the ball would either go directly from the goalie to the centre midfielder of Callum McGregor, or it would get to him via Carter Vickers or Starfelt. That's not happening as much. He also doesn't have the backup, of course, of the two fullbacks who are not playing as centrally as they did before. Are you concerned about McGregor's performances, or indeed the comments that he made after the Killie game, talking about we need to figure out what's going wrong and sort it out quickly?
The comments are definitely a cause for concern, because that kind of, the idea that there's nobody steering the ship is not a good place to be. But I'll say the same thing about Callum McGregor I said about Abada earlier on. I don't think it's fair to judge the performance of one player in a game where the whole team were crap. Mm-hmm. So let's just, let's have a bit of perspective there. Callum McGregor is a superb player who has served Celtic for his entire footballing life and will continue to do so for several years to come, hopefully. And, everybody's entitled to have a bad game now and again. And he had a shocker at the weekend. He's not been great this season so far. But I think it's more down to the change in training regimen, the change in tactics, the change in the approach, as we talked about with Joe Hart. And I think there needs to be a bit of adjustment from both sides here. Yes, the players need to adapt to the new system, but the manager also needs to not be as rigid with his formation and realise, I've got to play to my strengths here. This is what these guys can do. I need to let them do it. Example, the inverted fullbacks. Maeda dropping deeper to take a bit of the pressure off Taylor. Kyogo being allowed a bit of a freer rein to kind of create stuff. The problem at the weekend, particularly with Kyogo, was that he was dropping deep so often to try and make things happen that he then wasn't at the other end to try and get on the end of the stuff he was creating, because that's what a striker should be. And I think, the whole team just they looked like a team that didn't quite know what they were doing. And Callum McGregor's comments seem to kind of codify that. So I'm worried by the comments, but I'm not particularly worried about Callum McGregor as an individual, because when the team come good, he'll come good, because we know he's one of our best players.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that form, like you say, will flow through the captain. He's been so influential. And as I said during the game. Inspirational, Lawrence, and so far as when the chips are down, he's one of the guys you look at. I think last season, Jota was also one of those individuals that you would look at to pull us out of a situation, get us out of jail, if you like. He had the kind of creativity and the quality, whereas McGregor has that influence of being the captain and that never say die combative attitude. I do think there are reasons, Lawrence, beyond his own form that is affecting his performances, and the reasons, like Liam says, there are round about him. You know, the shape of the team isn't really conducive to the performances we're used to from Callum McGregor. But this is a player who performed really well under Brendan Rodgers before. It's not as though the manager and the captain don't see eye to eye or can't play together. You know how highly he regards him. I mean, he didn't take the job until he spoke to Callum McGregor. You know, so obviously they're going to work through it. Is it a case of McGregor having to adapt to this new kind of view and this new way of playing, Lawrence, or do we do the tinkers until such times as everything settles down, as Liam suggests? What do you reckon?
Listen, I think with Callum, he's not going to see as much of the ball, changing style. Everything was going through him, and he won't see as much of the ball. So there might be a perceived drop off on Callum's head. I don't notice him as much, but there's no doubt in Callum McGregor's quality on the park. You know, there's a few players that are top end of quality in our squad. Cam Carter-Vickers, unfortunately, we're without him just now. Jota, we've sold him. Kyogo, Calmac, probably out. You know, so I'd say that's the top four in terms of quality at Celtic, or it was last season. And, you know, we've got two in the team. I think there's a lack of quality that's something that's just now. We've not replaced Jota's quality. Someone inventive enough for a Jet. Yang looks good, but who knows if he'll deliver? You know, it remains to be seen. Liam's pointed out, you know, things take a wee bit of time to adapt. Keep it in perspective, you know. Yes, we lost at Kelly on an artificial pitch. It was a cup game, first cup loss in a couple of years. Brendan's first cup loss. You know, I wouldn't say, you know, we're going to have a terrible season based on that alone. I'm sure Brendan will get it right. It's just where we are in terms of transfers. I thought we'd have brought in a bit more quality, and defensively just now we've got a bit of a crisis. I think we should be looking at the transfer market to address.
I'm sure it's ongoing, Lawrence, because I mean, when Brendan comes out and talks about it after a game, you know how Brendan likes to use the media to his advantage, and by the way, I think that can be used in a good way. He comes out and you make a comment, we need more quality. That's also a message to the recruitment team. And, you know, although it's Brendan Rodgers, he's still going to be emotional. He's still a human being at the end of the day, being very disappointed after a defeat, maybe frustrated at the fact that he's not got the quality in that he would have expected at this stage. We've spoke about some of the reasons why that might be. The fact that we're perhaps being held to ransom by clubs who think that we've got money burning a hole in our pocket due to the fact that we've sold the Bolds Jota for a lot more than most people expected. So I think there's a lot to happen over the next couple of weeks in terms of the transfer ins and outs at Celtic. However, I want to talk about the St Johnstone game, Liam. What changes do you see happening against St Johnstone? I don't think that there's going to be wholesale changes because there's been a few forced already in terms of the injuries that we're going to have to deal with.
Yeah, I think that what we might see, hopefully, is a bit of a faster tempo to the game. I think that there was a definite lack of urgency in the Kilmarnock game. There seemed to be a kind of a malaise, like, oh, just keep the ball and keep moving it about and something will happen, and nothing happened. The onus is on us to make things happen. And St Johnstone will set up similarly to Kilmarnock. They'll sit deep, they'll try and hit us on the break. And in Stevie May, they've got a guy who is very capable of doing that. So we need to be careful. But I just want to see a greater intensity. I want to see players getting out there and showing us that last weekend was a blip and that it's not indicative of this wider crisis that the media is currently, the narrative that they're currently pushing. One game is not a crisis, right? However it works. I mean, let's face it, we win our next two games, no one's even going to talk about the Kilmarnock game anymore. beat St Johnstone, then then beat the forces of darkness, and suddenly all is rosy again. That's what's going to happen, and we need to keep that perspective. Like I said, Celtic teams notoriously are slow starters when a new manager comes in. As long as we get it right by the time we play that mob, I'll be okay with it,
Yeah, and also, that you try to tap in, Lawrence, to the way thinking, having a siege mentality where for the last 48 hours, it's been all negative stories around Celtic and the crisis and all this kind of stuff. And I think sometimes that can feed a guy like Brendan Rodgers so that, the backs are to the wall and you come out fighting. And what we can see on Saturday, I hope, is a more fluid and, as Liam says, high-tempo version of this team. We know that, I know he's talking about bringing more quality in, but it's not as though we lack quality. We've got a lot of quality in that side as well, Lawrence. How do you see us lining up against St Johnstone? What kind of changes in personnel or even in shape would you expect on Saturday?
Well, I think a forced change at centre half. I think we'd see Scales come in. I don't think we'll get any other choice. The back four picks itself, doesn't it? No, it just is where we are.
The back four picks itself because you just pick the four guys that are fit. That is exactly.
That's where we are. It's in midfield. Callum starts. I don't think there's any doubt. I think Matt Riley's done enough to start. Maybe I'd like to see a wee bit of Quan. Get some time at the weekend.
Right.
Up top, you've got Kyogo fit. Who else is going to play up there?
You've got to play Kyogo.
Yeah. I would probably start Maeda and Abada again. Yeah. So, boys,
right.
You're the fans of performance here.
But this is the thing. Liam quite rightly said, Lawrence, about Abada and the fact that he does perform well against Rangers. And we've seen it for years that certain players like playing against certain teams or at certain stadiums. Abada performs well against Rangers, we know that. But I think against St Johnstone, going back to your midfield, you mentioned Quan. I'm not convinced about him yet. But I do think that Iwata needs a game in midfield to remind everybody that he actually performed pretty well there in midfield last season when he was given the chance. And I think St Johnstone's a good opportunity for that. But I do think Rodgers will go back to the Turnbull. I think he'll play Turnbull, although Home didn't play a particularly bad game at the weekend. I've got to say, he was a surprise inclusion for me. And then on the wing, I do think that he'll give Yang the start. And it does look as though you're dropping Abada if you do that. But it's just really to see what he's got in the tank for more than a 10, 15-minute appearance, Liam. So the changes I'm looking at, we've already spoken about the defence. You picked the only four defenders we've got fit other than Bernabe, who won't be playing left back. And then in the midfield, I would be picking Iwata, O'Reilly and McGregor. And then up top, it would be Maeda, Kyogo, and I would play Yang. I would start with Yang and bring Abada on to get a run and then make that decision before the Rangers game as to who starts. But that's the changes I would make, Liam. What about yourself?
No, I pretty much agree with that. I think Yang has shown enough to earn a start. I would definitely like to see more of Iwata if we can accommodate that. But the thing about Abada is, yes, as Lon says, he likes to do it against them. But whether that be as a starter or as an impact sub, you could start with Yang potentially and let him turn their defenders inside and out for an hour and then throw Abada on to run at the tired legs, Dare I say it, maybe try and snatch a penalty or something, unlikely as it is against them, you never know, right? But I think that Abada's going to play a part against Rangers for sure. But I wonder if perhaps starting him on the bench might be the way to go.
Yeah, well, I'm looking forward to it because I do think that sometimes this wild card that you mentioned before can work. It really can work, Liam, because it's the unexpected nature of it for the opposition as much as giving you a wee spark yourself. A few points before we wrap up for this afternoon. John Sweeney is in on the YouTube channel. If Rocky is injured long term, we need another centre half. This is what Lawrence was talking about earlier on loan to buy We can't go into the derby with Ralston, Kobayashi and Scales in defence if we get another couple of injuries. Well, I was asking about Kobayashi this morning, John, and apparently he's also injured. I think Nawrocki is the one that there's maybe a question around whether or not he's going to be fit for the Rangers game. So I'm pretty sure we will get those questions in the pre-match conference with Brendan Rodgers at the end of this week. Ian McMonigal, so what happened to O'Reilly on Sunday? I thought O'Reilly played... Yeah, in a sense, I thought O'Reilly was the one who had the creativity in the midfield, Ian. And if anyone was going to create something, it would have come from Matt O'Reilly. That's my personal view on it. And Robert Hyland disagrees. He reckons no penalty and no offside. Get the green tinted specs off, Lawrence. Get them off now.
Yeah, I said that there's no on the offside. On the penalty, the defender hasn't made any contact with the ball. He's tripped the player. If it's not a penalty, what is? Now listen, Paddy Lavery hasn't been in the comments today from Ardoyne. It's good. Paddy has become a granddad. So
yes, he has.
Paddy out there.
Yes, he has. We've been given we gave him a big shout out yesterday, and we hope everybody's fit and healthy. Paddy, you are a long time Acsom viewer, and we appreciate everybody who gets involved. One final thing from John Bosas is talking about refs being mic'd up on the penalty handball. The fans there and those on TV heard loud and clear the reasons for the decision during the Women's World Cup. And you know what? It's about transparency. I've said this before. If you've got transparency, then paranoia and conspiracy are removed from the equation. What are we up to as Acsom? On Friday night, we've got a live event, which is completely sold out at Don Max, but we do have some tickets available for the October. Very few. I think we're down to the last 20-odd for Van Hooijdonk, Tom and Cadete. The link for that is under the video, as is the link for Jamie Tierney, because we are collecting football jerseys. We want to get 100 football jerseys. Celtic jerseys, get them signed and framed and auctioned off for Jamie's fight against Duchenne muscular dystrophy, which is a condition I had no knowledge of prior to speaking to Jamie's dad. And we are going to be supporting the family for as long as we possibly can on a Celtic State of Mind. One final thing is Acsom, as you know, is an award-winning platform. You can see the awards on the right-hand side of your screen. We are up again this year for Football Content Awards and a number of categories we're going for. All the details are under the video. If you want to place a wee vote, feel free to click on that link. Costs you nothing, and it can send guys like me and Lawrence down to some godforsaken place, Lawrence, for a wee shindig. Anfield.
Yes.
Yeah, we've been to London before. We've been to Manchester. This year it's at Liverpool. So, yeah, we'd love to go down. We'd love to bring a couple of awards up. And you can do your bit if you think we deserve it, of course, by voting on the link underneath. Yes, we've got Liam in a PSV Eindhoven top. God knows why you're wearing that, Liam, but hopefully we can talk about that tomorrow as well. We tend to stick to the Celtic content. Liam is appearing from Celtic Down Under. You can see their boxing kangaroo in the top right-hand side of the screen. Go and check the guys out on the socials and on YouTube. 1,200 strong, a lot of unhappy customers in the comments field, and that is understandable. Thanks, everybody, for getting involved. Thank you to Lawrence Conley and to Liam Carrigan for joining me on a Celtic State of Mind.